Picture a dragon. What does it look like? Has it got four legs with wings, or is it more of a serpent-type thing? What does the dragon represent? Does it symbolize power, wisdom, or prosperity, or is it more sinister? A source of evil, cunning, and a deadly foe. Everyone has their own interpretation of dragons and what they portray. Most of us know dragons from countless depictions in literature, film, animation, and gaming. History buffs will be familiar with European and ancient obsessions with slaying dragons, and anyone who's traveled around East and Southeastern Asia will have come across endless images of dragons. From The Hobbit and Harry Potter to Pokemon and Game of Thrones, dragons are one of the most widely recognized mythical creatures. Which leads to the question, where did they come from? Where did that idea of dragons originate, The easiest answer would be everywhere. This is because almost every ancient civilization had its own unique portrayal of dragons and what they stood for. The earliest evidence of dragons from storytelling and artifacts comes from China. However, representations of dragon-like creatures have been found literally all over the world, from China and then down throughout Asia to India and Australia, in ancient Mesopotamia, and, then the Egyptian and Greek empires. Native American cultures, the Incas and Aztecs all had some form of a dragon in their folklore and mythical belief systems. So where did that all begin, and how did various cultures regard dragons? Sorry, I just like saying dragons like that. Anyways, the oldest known physical evidence of dragons comes from China, and it dates back to roughly 4,500 BCE. Images of C-shaped dragons have been found carved into pieces of jade. Dragons were, and they still are, highly revered in China, as they were seen as providers of rain and fire, two of the crucial elements. Chinese dragons were believed to come from distant seas and were largely wingless. Their bodies were serpent-like with scaled skin. Like dragons from other cultures, Chinese dragons had reptilian torsos with claws, horns, and wild eyes. As Chinese influence spread, so did the prevalence of dragons in new cultures. Japan, Korea, Thailand, Vietnam, and a host of other Asian countries have all adopted the dragon as a symbol of good fortune and prosperity, a positive creature. In the Chinese zodiac, the dragon is held in the highest esteem. While dragons were and still regarded as the embodiment of evil in some cultures, Chinese dragons are compassionate. They not only provide vital rain and fire, but are regarded as one of the wisest creatures, along with the phoenix, tortoise, and unicorn. All three mythical creatures, those ones. However, in other civilizations, dragons were something to fear, and whenever possible, conquer. The word dragon comes from the Greek word drakon, meaning serpent, which too came from an older verb meaning to watch, which ties in with how ancient cultures, in particular Greece, viewed dragons. In the classical Greek tale Jason and the Golden Fleece, the precious fleece is watched over by an ever-watchful dragon, whose eyes never close. This fierce creature was called Drakon Kolkikos, giving birth to the image of dragons as crafty, fearsome entities. Greek dragons were seen to be immoral and capable of spitting fire and poison. The Roman Empire and European civilizations both were heavily influenced by ancient Greece, and this portrayal of dragons happened to stick. In Egyptian mythology, dragons were represented as huge, serpent-like creatures that were capable of both good and evil. From as far back as 2180 BCE, ancient texts mention the existence of a dragon Apep that battled Ra, the god of light. In turn, Ra was aided by the dragon Nehabeku in such battles. Mesopotamian stories date back almost as far as those from China and tell a lot of dragon monsters that rose from the sea to spread absolute havoc and destruction. Perhaps the most famous of these was the Babylonian dragon Tiamat, which sought to destroy all of creation. Only the supremely brave god Marduk could save humanity, and he ultimately slayed the beast. On the other side of the world in Mesoamerica, dragons were again prominent in mythology. From the Mayan civilization throughout the Aztec and the Inca empires, a diverse range of dragons were widely accepted and depicted in artwork, as well as monuments and texts and stories. As in Asian cultures, Mesoamerican dragons were largely revered for their wisdom and their protective powers. For example, the Aztecs worshipped Quetzalcoatl, who was part serpent, part bird. This dragon was believed to provide rain, wind, and sun, as well as ensure healthy crops and the safety of the people. This draws very strong parallels with the Chinese dragons, later seen prolifically throughout Asian countries such as Japan, Vietnam, and Korea. Japanese dragons are also serpent-like, wingless, and they come from the sea. They too bring immense power and good fortune, making them a highly esteemed mythical symbol. As Chinese influence spread further west via the trade routes, Persian depictions of dragon became more Asian in appearance. Longer reptilian bodies, often without legs and being comprised of several animals. When the Roman Empire expanded throughout Europe, so did the mythology of dragons. And when the Latin Church sent forces to fight the Crusades in the late 11th century, Middle Eastern and Persian dragon depictions were introduced to medieval Europe, which resulted in a fundamental difference in dragon mythology. Firstly, the European or continental dragons were believed to represent evil, and so they had to be slayed, which was in very stark contrast to the exalted Asian and Mesoamerican dragons. Their physical appearance also differed from other dragons around the world, where they were depicted with bat-like wings. The Old English poem Beowulf is often credited by historians as introducing this concept of winged dragons. The poem is thought to have been written around 700 CE, and it tells of the hero Beowulf vanquishing a bloodthirsty dragon with huge wings and fiery breath. While the European dragons were initially portrayed negatively, over time they have come to also represent power and protection, much like those from Asia and Mesoamerica. This is especially the case in Britain and Germany. Classic example is the Welsh national flag, which has a mighty red dragon protecting a green field. The big question is, why did people all over the world have a concept of dragons independently of one another? Many of these cultures never came into contact with one another, so here are two theories. The first argues that humans are instinctively fearful of reptiles and large winged birds. Think like snakes, crocodiles, crows, or vultures. Ancient cultures created dragons from creatures that they naturally feared, long reptilian bodies with clawed feet and wings. This second theory has a more scientific basis, however. We know that early civilizations found dinosaur fossils and bones. These were discovered throughout the world, in America, Asia, Mesopotamia. What would these remains have looked like to the people who found them? They had no way of knowing that they were from a species that died millions of years ago. Instead, it would be really reasonable to assume that somewhere, large beasts roam the earth and the seas. Add some healthy imagination to the mix, and it ain't hard to see how the concept of dragons was conjured up all over the world coincidentally. Dragons might indeed be a symbolic link between modern civilizations and the age of dinosaurs, or they might represent something more intrinsic, reflecting a basic human impression of something we naturally consider to be evil, powerful, or fortuitous. Whatever the case is, dragons have just been ubiquitous in folklore around the world, making them one of the most truly fascinating mythical creatures out there. At least, I think so.